On a sunny day in North Hollywood, Los Angeles at 9:16 a.m., two friends who bonded over pumping iron at Gold's Gym and shared a love of heist films sat in a white 1987 Chevrolet Celebrity outside this Bank of America on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. After months of meticulous preparation that included extensive recon, Larry Phillips and Emil Matasareanu were about to attempt one of the most infamous bank robberies in Los Angeles history. Armed with illegally modified semi-automatic and fully automatic AK-47 and AR-15 style assault rifles, both men donned bulletproof vests in addition to a patchwork of homemade body armor that included ballistic plates to protect vital organs, legs, and arms. In addition, the AK-47s had been fitted with drum magazines capable of holding more than 100 armor-piercing rounds. Although both men took muscle relaxers to calm their nerves, this wasn't their first rodeo. Just 2 years prior, in 1995, they proved their willingness to use extreme violence with the cold-blooded murder of a Brinks armored car guard named Herman Cook in broad daylight outside a bank in Canoga Park while a dozen witnesses looked on. They never even gave the 51-year-old a chance to hand over the cash, simply opening fire on the man from close range with fully automatic assault rifles, in addition to gravely wounding his partner who sat inside the armored truck, as the vehicle's bulletproof exterior was no match for their firepower. Prior to this day in North Hollywood, Phillips had used a radio scanner to monitor police transmissions. Using watches stitched into the wrist of their custom-made suits, they set an alarm for 8 minutes, the estimated response time before LAPD arrived. As the two men approached the bank with over 40 pounds of weapons and ammunition strapped to them, the months of meticulous planning evaporated in an instant when two LAPD officers, Lauren Farrell and Martin Perello, happened to be driving by and watched as the two hulking figures armed to the teeth lumbered into the bank like some nightmarish transformers. Officer Farrell issued the first call.
5840, requesting assistance. We have a possible 211 in progress at the Bank of America.
Upon entering the bank, Emil opened fire into the ceiling in an attempt to scare the approximately 30 bank staff and customers inside and discourage resistance. He then shot open the bulletproof door, gaining access to the tellers and vault area, which were designed to resist only low-level velocity rounds. The robbers then forced an assistant manager to open the vault and begin filling their money bag. However, due to changes in the bank's delivery schedule, the vault contained significantly less than the $750,000 they expected. Enraged by this development, Emil fired a full drum magazine of 75 rounds into the bank's safe, destroying much of the remaining money. Little did Larry and Emil know that after a spate of robberies, this particular Bank of America had reduced the amount of cash held at the branch in an attempt to limit its risk of becoming a target. Before leaving, hostages were locked in the bank vault, and the two robbers left with a little over $300,000, including 3 die packs which later exploded, ruining the take. Hearing the gunfire inside, LAPD backup units had already surrounded the bank, standard issue 9mm pistols drawn. They had no idea the terror they were about to face. At approximately 9:24, Phillips exited the bank and without hesitation opened fire on the police. Pinned down by the heavy sprays of automatic gunfire, officers took cover, gravely unprepared for a firefight of this magnitude.
Of course, you see the bullets ricocheting off the cars.
6 officers as well as 3 civilians that had taken cover behind a near patrol car were hit. Phillips even fired on the LAPD helicopter surveying the scene from above, forcing it to withdraw to a safer distance. Up until this point, the city of Los Angeles was no stranger to the occasional shootout, but this was something out of a Hollywood movie. For over 44 hellish minutes, Larry and Emil bombarded the officers with an assault from military-grade weapons, firing more than 1,100 rounds at the hopelessly outgunned LAPD, who returned fire only to see their bullets cut short by the robbers' heavy armor.
If they've got automatic weapons, there's nothing we have that can stop them.
Several officers even acquired 5 AR-15 style rifles from a nearby gun store to combat the bandits. In a violent final act, the North Hollywood Shootout was a grand finale to an era where between roughly 1985 and 1995, Los Angeles was appointed the infamous title of the bank robbery capital of the world, and this bloody day would change policing in the United States forever. The late 80s and the first half of the 90s were a tumultuous time in Los Angeles history.
All of a sudden, it just started shaking. A few people that we hired, they sort of got away from us.
while the highs of the Showtime-era Lakers were in their prime.
This has indeed been a storied rivalry.
Winning back-to-back championships in 1987 and 1988.
How many more of these would you like to get under your belt?
About 20.
Los Angeles was in the grips of a spiraling crack epidemic.
Michael worked on this street at a house protected from the police by 12-year-old Lookout. He described a cocktail lounge atmosphere where crack was served instead of alcohol.
Drugs are menacing our society.
Rampant gang violence.
It's already been a violent and bloody holiday weekend in Los Angeles.
Skyrocketing homicide rates.
I don't know. I guess everybody in LA is crazy.
And an AIDS epidemic that was devastating entire communities. Amidst all this, LA was also gaining another reputation. One as the undisputed bank robbery capital of the world. This number peaked in 1992 with an all-time record of 2,641 banks robbed in a single year. To put these numbers into perspective, that's an estimated one bank robbery every 45 minutes of each banking day, and was so constant that one Bank of America teller on Crenshaw reported being robbed 13 times. It's reported that when 5 Bank of America branches were robbed in under an hour, an FBI agent shrugged and called it just another day in LA. As you can imagine, this was fodder for national news and Hollywood scripts in a city where at one point 28 banks were robbed in a single day. But in a nation that has more banks scattered across its landscape than any other country on earth, what was it that set Los Angeles apart from every other major city in the United States? Bank robbery is nothing new in the US. In fact, one could argue it's a celebrated part of American culture.
Rock and roll!
For over 100 years, the sensational exploits of criminals like Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, and Jesse James have captured the imagination of everyday Americans. Tales of these criminal escapades have been immortalized through music, television, movies, books, and much more.
Well, that ought to do it.
These living legends and the lawmen who chase them are ingrained in American folklore, from armed bandits robbing stagecoaches in the Wild West to Depression-era bank robbers who became national celebrities of their time, symbolizing the common man's distaste for a seemingly rigged financial system. Many in the general public even had a positive view of infamous bank robbers of the time, like Pretty Boy Floyd, who played into their Robin Hood persona, destroying mortgage documents, freeing working class people from their debts. But although bank robbery is as American as apple pie and committed in every corner of the nation, how does one city accelerate to the top, becoming the epicenter in a 10-year span where banks were robbed over 17,000 times? It's impossible to point to a singular reason, but most experts agree that there's one major contributing factor that came to define Southern California culture, and that's
cars, factory fresh. This year we're making nearly 9 million of them, a record. You might conclude that we love cars more than twice as much as babies.
In the early 20th century, Los Angeles had transformed from a city reliant on streetcar and train-based transportation to one where the automobile reigned supreme. Unlike older, more densely built cities in the eastern United States, Los Angeles expanded outward rather than upward, leading to the creation of vast suburban areas. This sprawl made the car a necessity rather than a luxury, as transportation systems struggled to keep up with the demands of a rapidly expanding city. By 1920, Los Angeles had the highest per capita rate of car ownership in the U.S., 4 times more automobiles per capita than the national average, and 8 times more than a much denser Chicago. The development of an extensive freeway network in the mid-20th century further solidified the automobile's place in LA life.
So you're gonna take Canyon View Drive over to San Vicente, and then make a left and go 405 north?
Totally like that.
As freeways were designed to connect the numerous neighborhoods and suburbs, making it faster for residents to commute long distances. Cars became a symbol of freedom and mobility, embodying the California dream of independence and exploration. Over time, this car-centric infrastructure shaped the city's culture, leading to the emergence of iconic elements such as drive-in theaters, car hops, and became instrumental in influencing urban planning. At the same time, it's no secret that the advent of cars revolutionized bank robbery.
I love this fucking job.
Open the damn door!
John Dillinger, one of the most infamous bank robbers of the 1930s, had a deep appreciation for cars, which he famously referred to as his best pals. Dillinger understood that a fast, reliable getaway car was crucial to success in the robbery game, favoring high-performance vehicles like the Ford V8, which was one of the fastest cars available at the time. Just like in Dillinger's glory days, the car-centric culture of Los Angeles meant that nearly everyone, including criminals, had access to a vehicle. Cars were an essential part of daily life in LA, and this accessibility made it easier for robbers to execute bank heists. Providing anonymity by their widespread use in the city, it also made it difficult for witnesses to provide useful information to law enforcement, as criminals could easily change cars or blend in with regular traffic. Combine this with LA's vast freeway system, this provided bank robbers with multiple fast escape routes, making it easier to evade capture. The ability to hop onto a freeway immediately after a robbery meant that criminals could cover significant ground in a short amount of time, complicating police efforts to stop them. LA was quickly becoming what some described as an auto civilization, and in this brave new world, convenience was king.
Yes, things have changed.
One of the first fast food drive-thrus as we know it today, complete with an intercom system for ordering, was launched in 1948 by In-N-Out Burger in Baldwin Park. And by the 1970s, drive-thru service had exploded on the scene, becoming ubiquitous in just about every corner of the region. As restaurants began shifting their business models to please a growing population that valued drive-thru convenience at the top of the list, retail banks took note. Customers made it clear that they no longer wanted to drive 20 minutes to do their banking. The business landscape was changing, and through the 1970s, banks shifted away from singular locations that resembled fortresses with thick granite walls, armed guards and bars over the teller windows, into widespread networks of branch offices with a warmer approach to meet the needs of communities with a mobile population.
There's a new spirit of doing business in the 80s.
Only one California bank gives you 24-hour person-to-person service
any day of the year. It takes deposits, gives you cash.
California, banks are paying.
In addition to a friendlier atmosphere, nothing says convenience more than placing your business at the bottom of a freeway on-ramp. Unfortunately, this also proved equally convenient for opportunistic thieves looking for an easy mark. By 1980, retail banking had thousands of storefront branches across the LA region, many of them situated along prime getaway routes with very little security guarding them. Leading up to 1980, this target-rich environment, combined with a fast getaway, more than 6 million vehicles, and a seemingly endless thousands of miles of freeway inadvertently created a dream landscape for would-be bank robbers, and word was getting out. Follow a few simple rules and you can make some fast cash with little chance of getting caught. You might say that these factors alone would answer the question as to why LA became the epicenter of bank robbery, but there was one more element thrown into the mix that sent the trajectory of bank robberies on a meteoric rise.
The drug's so powerful it will empty the money from your pockets.
Crack cocaine.
Crack.
Smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack.
By the late 1980s, the crack epidemic was sweeping through Los Angeles, devastating all strata of society, and fueling a wave of addicts desperate to feed their addiction by any means possible. This wave of easily accessible, highly addictive drugs flooded the streets and fed an insatiable need for a quick buck. Naturally, bank robbery offered a fast solution to this problem.
Do you have money jitters? Ask the obliging Bank of America for a jar of soothing instant money.
By 1985, local LA area bank robberies had shot up past 1,000. By 1990, it had jumped another 56% to 1,644.
As you can see, we've got 1,126 robberies in 1996. Los Angeles has got one hell of a bank robbery problem.
FBI agent Bill Redder estimated that during this time, up to 85% of all bank robbers were addicted to one drug or another, mostly crack cocaine, but also including meth and heroin. One infamous character that exemplified this perfect storm brewing in LA around this time was Eddie Dodson, aka the Yankee Bandit. Prior to his life of crime, Dodson was a well-known figure in the social scene, running a popular antique furniture store on Melrose Avenue that catered to Hollywood celebrities. However, He soon fell into the grips of severe heroin addiction, and by 1983, he was so desperate that he began robbing banks to fund his habit. Between 1983 and 1984, Dodson committed a staggering 64 bank robberies in the region, setting a record for the most bank heists by a single person. Dodson's MO was smooth and nonviolent. He would enter a bank well-dressed, wearing a New York Yankees cap with sunglasses, and hand the teller a note demanding money, quietly leaving with the cash. It's interesting to note that during this heyday of bank robbery crime, there were no shortages of colorful characters. The FBI was tasked with assigning a moniker to every serial bank bandit in the 7-county area that encompasses metropolitan Los Angeles. With so many robberies occurring, it made police efforts easier to spot connections between heists if assigned a unique name. Then when a bank is robbed, authorities can ask the witnesses a series of questions to quickly identify the bandit. According to one source who worked in law enforcement at the time, the nicknames work because bank robberies are nearly always committed by serial bandits who don't like change. It's been found that once a robber is successful, they'll nearly always rob again. And they'll likely use the same mode of operation, often even wearing the same clothing. So when agents are working to catch more than 40 active serial bank robbers at any given time, assigning nicknames made it easier to keep them straight. The key to a good name was pinpointing the suspect's defining features, be it their clothing, age, geographic region, or general MO, so the description would be memorable. In a sense, giving each bandit a descriptive title was an advertisement enabling the public to remember features that could lead to arrests. It's difficult to find a reliable list of the full cast of suspects arrested during this era, but here are a couple interesting ones I was able to dig up. The Chevy Chase bandit, who slipped on the floor mat of the first bank he robbed, stood up, brushed himself off, and went about his business, just like the comedian in a classic episode of Saturday Night Live.
Live from New York, it's Saturday!
Then there was the Rodney Dangerfield bandit, who was simply ignored by tellers after he came unarmed to his first 2 bank heists. He got no money and no respect during those 2 attempts, but he did walk away with a nickname. The Bozo bandit, who wore a clown costume. The Benihana bandit, who wielded sharp knives. Also a 300-pound woman dubbed the Miss Piggy bandit, which you can imagine how she got that name. I didn't come up with it, so don't get mad at me. The Miss America bandit, who was said to be tall and beautiful. The Calm bandit, whose MO was to slide a note to the teller reading, "I have a gun, give me everything. Keep your eyes down." The Sporty bandit, who wore dark sunglasses as he robbed over $1,400 from a bank teller. And the list goes on. There was even a mother who left her 5- and 4-year-old children on a bus stop bench while she robbed the bank of $4,000. Not sure if she got a cool name. Now, I'm no expert on the psychology of crime, so take this with a grain of salt. But considering that the public was inundated with news of bank robberies on a daily basis, I wonder how many people were given the courage to rob a bank simply because so many people were doing it at this time and said to themselves, hey, I can do that. I mean, a lot of bank robbers around this time did have some short-term success. Based on historical crime reports, it was estimated that about 60 to 70% of bank robbers in LA during these years were able to initially escape, meaning they successfully fled the scene with the stolen money. However, the high rate of escape didn't necessarily mean long-term success, because it's found that most bank robbers are unlikely to retire after just 1 or 2 heists and continue pushing their luck. So I can imagine there are a few people out there who witnessed this crime wave happening on the news, saw a bunch of heists where robbers were walking off with thousands of dollars scot-free, and gained the confidence that they could pull one off as well. One example of this is a notorious group called the Baby Bandits. Masterminded by a charismatic ringleader who went by the name of Casper, the Baby Bandits were a group of notorious bank robbers who were active in Los Angeles between 1985 and 1990, who earned their nickname because of the young age of their members, some of whom were teenagers, and their audacious takeover-style heists. From what I gathered, it's rumored that Casper sparked his initial idea to outsource bank robbery when he was watching the news and heard about a group named the West Hills Bandits, who recently made off with a huge score of $437,000 from a bank in Tarzana. A light bulb went off in Casper's head, and shortly after he was teaching robbery tactics to youngsters, instilling in them the confidence and skills needed to carry out their own heists, sending armed bands of teenage and junior gang members into dozens of banks across the Southland. The baby bandits escalated their activities with reckless takeover-style robberies, often introducing themselves with bursts of gunfire, pistol whippings, and other violent tactics. These volatile and dangerous robberies soon made them a target by FBI, who captured the members in droves. But like any good general, Casper was able to replace his ranks and stay one step ahead of law enforcement for a while. That is, until his luck eventually ran out and he was arrested, leading to the dismantling of the group. And remember the $437,000 robbery by the West Hills Bandits that inspired Casper? Well, in contrast to the baby bandits' wild and violent takeovers, the West Hills Bandits had a slightly different approach. Named after the West Hills neighborhood in the San Fernando Valley where some of their robberies occurred, it's reported that the ringleaders were survivalists who were knocking off banks in order to prepare for an incoming apocalypse. Considered by police as meticulous and professional, the pair scored more than $1 million in 9 takeover robberies, often politely gathering customers together and telling them to stay calm and enjoy the show, before leaving with their loot, cheerfully thanking everyone on their way out. When police apprehended the West Hills Bandits and raided their home, authorities found a bunker containing 119 firearms and 25,000 rounds of ammunition. And this wasn't the only gang committing robberies in preparation for an apocalypse. On May 9, 1980, 5 heavily armed men led by a born-again Christian named George Wayne Smith attempted a takeover robbery of the Security Pacific Bank in the Riverside County of Norco that turned into one of the most violent events in law enforcement history. Similar to the West Hills Bandits, Smith and another man named Chris Harvin were preparing for a rapidly approaching apocalypse, which in their view only the well-armed and well-funded would survive. Neither had any previous criminal record, but they did have an elaborate plan that began with stealing a getaway van and kidnapping the driver. From there, just about everything went wrong. Almost from the beginning, their elaborate bank heist plan, complete with a diversion bomb that fizzled out, went south, and the botched robbery turned into a ferocious firefight in the middle of the street. With their teenage getaway driver killed, the 4 remaining robbers carjacked a pickup truck and went on a 40-mile running gun battle through the streets of Norco, onto a busy freeway and into the mountains above LA, where they ambushed pursuing police and escaped into the rugged canyons. When the dust settled, 3 people were dead, including 1 police officer, and almost 20 wounded, including 7 police officers. The massive amounts of gunfire damaged at least 30 police cars and numerous nearby homes and businesses. In addition, a sheriff's helicopter was even shot in the battle. Legends of bank robberies from this era, especially the notorious ones mentioned, are today the subject of numerous movies, podcasts, documentaries, books, articles, and so on. From the information I found, the number of bank robberies in 2023 was down to just 120. That's a far cry from its peak in 1992, when police records show the number of banks robbed in a single year to be approximately 2,641. And although I can't verify this information 100%, one article I read even said that during the late 80s, LA had more bank robberies than New York, San Francisco, Portland, and Sacramento combined. So what's the reason for the dramatic drop? Well, just like there were multiple factors that came together in a perfect storm that contributed to the astronomical rise in bank robberies, several things began to take shape during the following decade that aided the steep decline. One aspect that changed above all going into the 2000s was the fact that, simply, bank robbery wasn't paying as well as it used to. Gone were the good old days where, with just a little planning and some balls of steel, one could expect to walk into a bank and grab tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Beginning in the mid-90s, banks smartened up and began deliberately holding less cash on site, especially at teller stations. In addition, vault security became more sophisticated, and it became standard operating procedure for cash to be kept in time-locked safes, which could only be opened at specific times of the day or with a delay after activation. This meant that in a profession where success and failure was measured by one's ability to be in and out in an extremely short window of time, the ability to access large amounts of cash swiftly was becoming increasingly challenging. Add this to the fact that leading into the late 90s and early 2000s, the rise of digital banking and the increased use of credit and debit cards significantly reduced the need for banks to carry large amounts of cash on hand. As the 90s closed and the 2000s made its rise, people shifted towards online banking, further decreasing the need for physical cash to be held in branches. Simply put, the money just wasn't there anymore. Combine this with the fact that around this time, an extremely controversial policy implemented throughout the federal judicial system several years before began to have its impact felt. The 1989 Federal Uniform Sentencing Guidelines all but obliterated a parole system that had been sending even die-hard bank robbers back into the streets on an average of 3 to 5 years after conviction. According to FBI agent Bill Rader, the system was a revolving door. We were seeing the same guys over and over. They were coming out better bandits than when they had gone in. Loaded with bank thieves, the federal prison system was a finishing school for bank robbers. New harsher federal laws now allowed for much longer sentences for simple robbery, with greater sentences for those involving weapons. More importantly, there was a new mandate requiring a minimum of 85% of a sentence be served before eligibility for parole. The customary sentence for bank robbery immediately jumped from 20 years with a minimum of 17 served, and if using a weapon, you were now looking at 25 years. My guess is that repeat offenders were now being locked up for significantly more time, and that many others who were possibly on the fence about committing the crime of bank robbery backed down when the realization that they could now potentially spend the rest of their lives in prison became a reality. In addition, the 1994 California 3 strikes sentencing law took even more career criminals off the streets, and even more controversial federal sentencing guidelines for drug-related crimes began to take hold. Although still a major issue, drug use like crack was declining from its peak, and bank robbery numbers went down as addicts dropped out of the game and more hardcore criminals disappeared into the prison system. Police records show that by 1997, bank robberies had declined by nearly 70% from their high in 1992. It's hard to find exact information on this, but from the statistics I found, the average successful bank robber in 2023 netted around $4,000 to $8,000 per single robbery. This seems like a sharp decline from the previous decades where in some of these stories we went over, robbers were walking away with many times that, even close to $500,000 at the high end, especially in takeover-style robberies. In all, with the stricter punishment and less big hauls, it seems like towards the late 90s and into the 2000s, bank robbery was looking like a lot more risk for less reward, and it was also getting harder. Technology-driven deterrence became a major factor for the decline as well, relying on eyewitnesses or grainy 35mm film from security cameras that took days to develop. Nowadays, every bank is equipped with multiple high-resolution cameras that can be shared in seconds with authorities, and not to mention that all it takes is one person on the internet to recognize a photo of a potential subject, and that's a wrap. Sophisticated fake currency disguised as real money like GPS trackers and die packs that bank tellers can easily slip into a thief's loot has made bank robbery all the more challenging. In short, most experts agree that the drop in bank robbery over the years in LA is credited to a combination of increased bank security, deterrent technology, law enforcement crackdown, aggressive prosecution, and banks carrying less cash. But this isn't to say people aren't stealing money anymore. The tactics have just adapted to methods with less risk, more profit, and no need for guns or violence. I mean, why walk into a bank looking to rob the place and risk the potential of getting into a shootout with police or getting slipped a die pack that'll just ruin everything you've worked so hard to get, when you can now just steal from the comfort of your own home? According to an article I found in The Guardian, statistics show that bank robbery, complete with demand note and use of a weapon, have declined 60% over the past 15 years in the US and typically net only $7,500 on average. Meanwhile, retail and identity theft crimes have soared, and the US Bureau of Justice Statistics placed the value of identity theft crime at $16 billion in 2021. The US National Retail Federation puts the yearly cost of organized retail crime at $94 billion, and the global value of cybercrime is placed at more than $9 trillion in 2024, according to estimates by Cybercrime magazine. So although traditional bank robbery as we know it is significantly down, it seems that many of these would-be criminals are moving towards cybercrime as an alternative. As for the infamous North Hollywood Shootout, or Battle in North Hollywood as some like to call it, much has been said about this notorious robbery that acted almost as a grand finale to a short period in Los Angeles history when it held the title as the bank robbery capital of the world. And the aftermath of this shootout could be the discussion of an entire feature-length documentary. In short, it didn't end well for Larry and Emil, as you can probably guess. When the dust settled, 12 police officers and 8 civilians were injured, and the 2 bandits didn't make it out alive. Numerous vehicles and other property were damaged and destroyed by the nearly 2,000 rounds of ammunition fired by the robbers and police. In the end, Larry was shot 11 times, including a self-inflicted gunshot wound, while Emil was shot 29 times before he died of his wounds. And behind me, at the Los Angeles Police Museum, you can see their outfits, weapons, and getaway car on display. But the North Hollywood Shootout was more than just a sensational story. It was an event that changed policing in the United States forever. Nearly 7 months after the incident, the Department of Defense gave 600 surplus M16 rifles to the LAPD, which were issued to each police sergeant. LAPD patrol vehicles began carrying AR-15s as standard issue, with bullet-resistant Kevlar plating in their doors as well. Also, as a result of this incident, LAPD authorized its officers to carry 45 ACP semi-automatic caliber pistols as duty sidearms, specifically the Smith & Wesson models 4506 and 4566. Prior to 1997, only LAPD SWAT officers were authorized to carry weapons of this caliber. In short, the North Hollywood Shootout was a catalyst to the arming of rank-and-file police officers in LA and nationwide with semi-automatic rifles, militarizing the police force and changing law enforcement forever. This could also be a whole documentary in itself, weighing the pros and cons of this decision. Today, the number of bank robberies in LA is significantly lower, but that's not to say large scores still aren't happening anymore. Although not technically a bank robbery, a recent heist on Easter Sunday in the San Fernando Valley, thieves stole $30 million from a money storage facility. It's reported to be the largest heist in Los Angeles and probably the United States, and so far the crew who pulled it off have eluded capture since the recording of this video. As FBI agent Bill Rader puts it in his memoir, as long as there are piles of money, there will be those wanting to steal it. Any lawman who thinks he can fundamentally change that is looking for a broken heart and a bitter retirement.